Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Episode 7, Cur Deus Homo, Why God Became Man, Anselm of Canterbury, Archbishop of Canterbury. He lived from 1033 to 1109. We're looking at Cistercian Benedictine reform, going into the wilderness and desert space of the Abbey in order to study a dialectic dialogue between one Basso and Anselm. Remember, Anselm is a Benedictine monk, was the abbot of Bec, had a tumultuous life. He was born in Aosta in northern Italy on the Swiss border in the mountains, and was educated by Lanfranc, and traveled a bit before he became a monk, finally settled down and took his vows. Vows are a very important concept in the middle to late part of our medieval period. Vows, of course, are those contracts that are made between individuals, in this case, in an ecclesiastical sense, between a novice and an abbot in the abbey, where the novice vows to embrace the rule of the abbey and to proceed to prepare for initiation into the monastery as a monk. The vow is an act of will. The vow respects human intelligence, human integrity. So there's no such thing as forced monasticism in the West, or there shouldn't be. In the West, the idea of the vow or the act of will comes from Augustine's theology, Confessions, City of God, De Trinitate, and all of his other works, in which he emphasizes the importance of turning what we know of the good into action. And we turn it into action by an act of will, a voluntary choice. Very much rooted and grounded in the nature of Christianity, which, as you all will remember if you are serious students of the New Testament, Christianity is a religion of persuasion. Christianity respects the integrity of every human being and respects their freedom of choice. You can choose God or you can choose the world. You can choose God through Christ by the Holy Ghost, or you can choose other gods. The whole idea is rooted and grounded in our ability to come to know the good and then to will it. So the whole world, the medieval world, the feudal world, was a world that was built around contracts and vows. Contracts and vows are indications of the respect for human intelligence and the capacity to will the good. I engage in a contract with you because I respect you, and I wish to engage in an understanding that we both will to uphold. Very important part of modern freedom, which begins in the Middle Ages. The feudal system is all based on vows, contracts, all indicating the greatest of respect for every human being. Many people say foolish things like the serfs in the Middle Ages were slaves. They were no such thing. They were bound by contracts. The serfs had made vows to their lords, landed lords. The landed lords made vows to their vassals, which included the serfs. Everyone had a contract with respect to everybody else, so everybody was accountable. Everybody was responsible to their word or for their word. Remember, we're a religion of the Word that was made flesh and dwelt among us. We need to be men of our word. When we sign the dotted line and we undertake a contract, agree to a contract, we are using our intelligence and free will to make a vow, to make a promise to another. And that's what Christianity is all about. a world of reason, free will, a world of vows, a world of respect, a world of accountability, a world that invites us into various forms of relationships. You remember when there was the great signing of the Magna Carta in England with King John and the barons. Well, the barons were the landed gentry, and the landed gentry wanted a say in the government. And so they engaged in a great contract. It included making many vows and promises, both between the lords and the kings and the king and the lords, all necessary for the sake of checks and balances, accountability, and making sure that everybody is willing to stand by the truth and work for the common good. This happens in the monasteries, and Anselm, of course, very much a creature of his own age in the feudal period, very much, interested in the world of vows and contracts. But the worlds of vows and contracts also show that we not only respect others, but we honor others. And so every contact, every vow that was made involved honoring another person, honoring them, honoring the fact that they're made in the image and likeness of God, respecting them, honoring them with a pledge, honoring them with an oath, honoring them with a vow, committing yourself to others. This is what the Christian religion is all about. And freedom is found in this world of contracts and vows, and then honor. Not only must the serfs and vassals honor their lord, their local lord, the aristocrat, the ruler, but the local lord, aristocrat, and ruler must honor the serfs and honor the vassals. He must respect them. He's accountable to them. If anybody breaks the contract, anybody breaks their vows, then they can be sued. They can be taken to the courts. Now, of course, in the situation of the monasteries, that kind of recourse was not necessary because, of course, there may have been times when men had made vows to a monastic order, and then in the process of the discernment and the educational preparation, they discovered that, no, they really weren't cut out for this. So, but anyway, the monastic orders could be much more lenient than the emerging city-states and the states themselves would be. But at any rate, it's all based on contracts, and contracts involving vows, acts of will also reveal a great deal of honor. And of course, this whole idea of honoring others, whether you're on the top or the bottom of the hierarchy, is profoundly Christian. Because remember, God came down from heaven to serve us, to wait on us, to minister to us, to help us, to labor and toil for us, to give his life for us. You see, only in Christianity do we overcome that sort of hierarchical dualism of a kind of pyramid, and the pyramid is sort of turned upside down when God becomes man. We're studying why God became man, looking for the reason, looking for the rationale of all of this, and very much aware that with the facts that are at our disposal from the New Testament, Old Testament, New Testament, the scriptures, the writings of the church fathers, with what is at our disposal as we try to understand the logic and the rationale of the incarnation, why God became man, why the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. With Anselm, we ought to always, remember that we're engaged here in a theology of honor, where not only is man called to honor God and give God his due, but there's a deep sense in which God has honored men. And, God has honored his creation. God has even honored the laws imposed upon a fallen creation of men, the law of sin and death, honored by God in the life that Christ lives by taking on sin, enduring sin, resisting sin, but becoming the unjust, in a sense, victim of sin. Unearned, unmerited, undeserved crucifixion. The punishment of sinners against God. What do sinners do to God's word made flesh? God's word in the flesh, they kill it. And literally they killed the word made flesh that dwelt among us, Jesus Christ. So, but you see in all of this, Christ himself, you see, honors us, honors our nature, honors our created essence by becoming one of us in order to restore us to God, reconcile us to God, recapitulate human nature. He's the second Adam. Repair us, redeem us. And what we're looking at here is Anselm trying to discover the logic and the rationale for why God saved us in the way that he did, why God became man, why the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, why the divine and the human came together in the one person of Jesus Christ, and why this was not only a possible way of saving us, but as we'll learn as we go through this text, and I'm sorry if we're going through it slowly, but it's a very thick text. It's difficult. We're in no rush, I hope. So anyway, as we go through it slowly, we're going to discover, the reason here, the reason that this is not just one way to save us amongst many ways, but as Anselm will discover in conversation and dialogue and dialectic with Basso, this is a necessary way. This is what had to be done if human nature was to be redeemed, was to be repaired, was to be restored, was to be able once again to righteously obey God, come into union and communion with God once again, have a reason for the hope that is in us, a reason for the faith that is in us, a reason or a logic that explains why it's necessary for God to do what he did for us. And of course, this is going to be a kind of unique way of describing it all in Anselm's Cur Deus Homo, why God became man. It's rather unique in comparison to the other attempts to describe the atonement or other attempts to describe redemption and the reason for it, the logic of it. Origen of Alexandria, 2nd century Byzantine philosopher, condemned as a heretic, probably unfairly, but that's for another class. Origen of Alexandria, Gregory of Nyssa, Athanasius, to an extent, Augustine of Hippo, all believed in the ransom theory of atonement. So the way they explained or articulated the meaning of why God became man was that, the devil had to be given his due. The devil had to be paid a ransom in order for humanity to be saved. So Jesus Christ paid the devil the price necessary for our salvation, which was the price of his life. Of course, then Origen and Augustine and Athanasius and Gregory Nyssa, they all say that what ended up happening was, of course, the devil thought that in procuring the death of Christ, he had secured a hold on Christ in death. But he was deceived because he didn't realize or didn't acknowledge or didn't understand that Christ was both God and man. And that, of course, death could not hold Christ down. Death could not keep Christ in the possession of the devil. This is a theory of the early church. The ransom theory was very, very popular, and I mean, I don't really want to get into that except to say that Basso, last time we were talking about Basso, was talking about wanting to really reject this theory because he said, the devil's a creature. And so the devil should have no hold on man, number one, because he belongs to God, and number two, because even though he persuaded man to sin, he doesn't or shouldn't really have a continued hold on him whereby he's demanding by a law, an eternal law, or a law that has been instituted by God. Basso doesn't want to go down the road where we think that the devil is given interest on his investment. And his investment is man, who is by nature now fallen, and now he wants interest on his investment. So he demands, in a sense, more sin. He demands more payment by way of sin. And so Basso wanted to make sure that Anselm wasn't going to go down into the ransom theory of the atonement as a reason or a logic or a rationale for why God became man, because Basso is already saying, the devil belongs to God. And the devil deserves nothing more than the sort of false happiness and false joy that came about when he persuaded Adam and Eve to sin. And he shouldn't be allowed to sort of have interest on all of that and possess man in any lasting way that determines the activity of God as man, the Word that was made flesh and dwelt among us, Jesus Christ. So Basso wants to sort of clear the air that, we're not going to allow for the ransom theory to go too far here. And also, Basso points out that, the devil is by nature unjust. And this, we're really looking at, God's justice and mercy as being secured for man in Jesus Christ. And so we don't want to say that God's justice and mercy is secured by reason of the devil's malice, or by reason of the devil's nature, which is malicious. His nature as malicious should dissuade us from thinking that, when God became man, when the Word was made flesh, Jesus Christ, we don't want to get the sense that the God-man, Jesus Christ, owes anything to Satan, or that he's in debt to Satan, or he has to pay a ransom to Satan. And the idea here with Anselm is that it's inconceivable to him that a fallen angel should have this kind of sort of Manichaean power against God, where you have sort of two gods that battle it out, like Star Wars. There are two gods who just, the world history has always been about the warfare between the two gods, God and the devil, or good and evil, or light and darkness. Anselm wants to avoid all of that because at the end of the day, the devil has been punished. He lives in his punishment, and he will never escape his punishment. So Anselm wants to leave that because he wants to clear up the theological space here, so that we are really looking at the relationship of God and man and how they're going to come back together first in Jesus Christ. What's the logic? What's the rationale for, why God became man? So what's the rationale? What's the logic for this? How do we answer this question? Why did he become man? And you see, we're clearing the space because what we're looking at now with Anselm is, not allowing ourselves to have a problem with three agents, God, the devil, and man. No, we really have an issue here between God and man. And this is what we really want to look at with Anselm. He wants to clear the space that we're examining in order to discover what's going on from God's side in the incarnation. What's going on from God's side in solving the problem of man's fall away from him. So you see, we're going to get rid of the devil. We're not going to deal with him. We're going to deal rather with God and man, because that's our question. Why did God become man? Why was the Word made flesh and dwelt among us? Why did the God-man, Jesus Christ, do what he did to save us? And of course, all these questions that come up are going to be answering why God became man. Why did God become man? And so in answering the question, we really want to clear the space, and we really want to be focused on just the alienation of man from God. Okay? What does the alienation mean? What is a potential redemption going to look like? Now, Basso wants to posit here, going back to last time, Basso wants to posit that God should have been able to simply issue a command. He could have just commanded salvation, commanded redemption. He could have just offered forgiveness. And you see, this is going to be something that Anselm's going to have to study with Basso. Is it the case that if God simply issued an edict and said all men are forgiven, then that would have solved the problem? And we're going to go into this, but Anselm's going to say, well, there's really a problem here. And we're going to have a problem as we move along with sin. How do you pay the price for sin? How do you, make an offering or an atonement for man's willful alienation from God, willful disobedience of God? How do you make atonement? How do you repair and redeem the fallen nature where, satisfaction, Anselm's going to say, has to be made for sin? There has to be a sin offering. And that's going to be very much in the forefront of Anselm's mind. And there are going to be two things that he's going to be very concerned with thinking about. One is satisfaction, and the other one is punishment. And these are two very distinct things, and we're going to have to look at how they're different as we move along. But, the whole idea with, salvation, redemption, atonement, why did God become man? We really want to get at trying to understand how it is that man can return to God. And we want to be very careful here not to resort to calling fire down from heaven, calling for God's, power and might and strength to overcome the enemy. Because, of course, at the end of the day, we've really got to realize that that's not the way of Christ. I could have called in legions of angels to rescue me, but he didn't. Why? What's the logic? What's the rationale? What's the reason? He could have called in legions of angels, but he's God as man. He's God made man. He's the God man. So what's that going to mean? There's a reason that he doesn't call in legions of angels. There's a reason he just doesn't cream all of his enemies. That's not the way of God. The way of God is a way of if-then. Conditional. Respects your intellect. Respects and honors your intelligence. Respects and honors you enough to engage in an if-then offer of salvation. What's God's vow to us in Jesus Christ? If ye love me, keep my commandments. I will pray the Father, he will send you another comforter. He'll come to you, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot see, the world can't hear. He makes a vow. We make a vow. A world of vows, an act of will, honoring us, respecting us. This is what this wonderful incarnation is going to be all about. You see, this is the age of freedom. Cistercian Benedictine monastery, the age of freedom. You know, we're not just going to call fire down from heaven. That's not the way of Christianity. And, you know, we're living in a medieval culture that is very war-torn. You know, the Christian West is at war with itself. I mean, it's at war with Islam. And Islam is a threat because Islam intends to conquer and subdue. And that's the method of Islam as a religion. That's not the message of Christianity, which is why it's going to be so difficult to analyze, you know, Christian responses to force. You know, the God we worship is a God of persuasion. He's a God who respects our intelligence. He doesn't force himself upon us. If you eat of the fruit that hangs from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, ye shall die. If, then, I respect you. Here are the conditions for union and communion with myself. That's what God says to us. He honors us, honors our intelligence. This is the medieval world. You know, Anselm's living through a very difficult time because, again, the Christian princes are, you know, warring amongst themselves for territory. They're warring amongst themselves. Anselm, in particular, is going to be caught up with the Norman conquest. William the Conqueror and his sons, William Rufus, William II, and then Henry I, the other son of William the Conqueror. He's going to be caught up in a period in which the monarchs of Europe are, you know, battling it out with the Pope and fighting for the power to appoint bishops, fighting for power over the church. And the earthly rulers are all maintaining, you know, the kings of England, the dukes of Burgundy, and, you know, the various Italian princes, German princes, the Holy Roman Emperor. I mean, they're all, you know, they're all vying for control of the appointment of bishops. And there's a great controversy called the investiture controversy. And of course, Anselm is on the side of the church, the Pope, against all the princes. Anselm saying the Pope should be, you know, the ruler of all earthly princes because the spiritual should rule the earthly. Heaven rules earth. Grace redeems nature. Faith purifies reason, and so forth. So Anselm's going to be on the side of the church and the Pope in the investiture controversy. So he's going to be at war with, you know, William the Conqueror, William Rufus, Henry I. He's going to be exiled as the Archbishop of Canterbury twice because he's maintaining the prerogatives of his own monastic foundation at Canterbury and maintaining his prerogative to support the Pope's appointment of bishops and the Pope's rule in England. And of course, the kings don't like that because the kings, by the way, not unreasonable, the kings think, well, we pay the clergy salaries, and if we pay their salaries, we should have some say in the appointment of bishops. So it's not unreasonable. It's not irrational. Anselm, however, is on, you know, very traditional, the cloistered Cistercian Benedictine. He's thinking about the need for, you know, the theological position of the church to be upheld in Rome by the Pope, and so he's very interested in, you know, in the logic of, you know, the journey to the greater city, which is the journey to the New Jerusalem, or the journey home to heaven. So you see, Anselm's caught up in this world where he's having to wage war with these earthly princes, and especially the family of William the Conqueror. And he's also cognizant of the dangers associated with any kind of Christianity that would be enforced. And, you know, this is the age of the Crusades. So, you know, it seems clear that he supports the Crusades, but he's not entirely happy with what's going on in terms of the use of force in the name of Christ, in terms of nation states and so forth. I think he's wanting to be very cautious and very careful with his fellow bishops and fellow abbots and the popes. And popes, I say popes, there were popes and there were anti-popes, remember. In the Middle Ages, you often had a situation where there was a pope and an anti-pope. Oftentimes, the pope is in Rome and the anti-pope is being supported by the French king in France. That's how it panned out a couple of times. But anyway, there are popes and anti-popes. There's all kinds of, division, church and state, faith and reason, the world and heaven. I mean, it's all happening, and with Anselm, it's all happening in his mind. And so the problem with Anselm is that he's thinking about all this, and he's also conscious of the fact, he at points in his journeys back and forth from Canterbury to Rome, he has been in places where he has encountered Saracens. So Saracens are Muslims. So he's encountered infidels. He's also encountered Jews, and he was not happy. There was a massacre of Jews at Rouen in 1095. And this is, just for, and some, this is, we don't, divide and conquer and kill non-Christians. We may to some extent divide and conquer, but we need to convince non-Christians, Jews, Turks, infidels. So we got Jews, Muslims, we got Gnostics, we got Neoplatonists, Neoplatonist pagans. I mean, our business is to convert through persuasion, through logic, through reason. And this is Anselm's mission and vocation. So he sees the massacre of the Jews. What are you doing? That's an absolute, not a disgrace. This is absolutely and utterly wrong. So, there were, the things he just stands against. He stood against slavery. Christian princes, seeing the Saracens and the Muslim rulers, they had slaves. Many medieval Christians wanted to adopt the practice, and Anselm said, no, slavery's out. No slavery. No killing Jews, no killing Muslims, Saracens. I mean, no. We have to have a wonderful conversation. And look at the freedom he has here in allowing the infidel, in allowing the unbeliever, all kinds of wonderful arguments that are quite compelling in the person of Basso. He's not a fool. He's actually offering good arguments for why God, in a sense, didn't need to become man, or why God didn't become man. He's playing devil's advocate, but he's intelligent because he's giving you the rational basis of the other side, which is a freedom. I don't need to kill you. I'm going to have a conversation with you. We're going to argue. We can still be friends, but we're going to argue. This is an incredible moment in history, right? Anselm Basso, arguing the two sides, but the freedom to be able to argue as adults and not have to kill one another. We're not living in barbarian times. We're not living in a barbarian pagan world. We're not living in the Muslim world on the Muslims' terms. No. We're inviting you, Mr. Muslim, Mr. Jew, Mr. Gnostic, Mr. Neoplatonist. We're inviting you to argue, and the argument is coming through the mind of Basso. What freedom. What an incredible, that's Christianity. No, I'm sorry that you don't want to embrace Christ and go to heaven, but you're not going to rain on my parade. I love you. I will pray for you. But by the same token, I don't have to kill you. You're not that important. No, I'm going to pray for you and God bless you. But the whole point is Christianity is a world that embraces the Socratic dialogue, takes up the Socratic dialogue, redeems it, repairs it, restores it to God. And so the Christian allows for the wonderful freedom of being able to give the enemy, being able to give the unbeliever, the infidel, a voice and a mind in a dialogue. And that's what we're doing. And that's why this thing is so incredible, because it sort of sets the stage for the possibility of a world in which, Christian principles are at the core and foundation of the world itself. But there is also a wonderful allowance of freedom of intellect that I honor. So, we're talking about how God honors man, man honors man. So Anselm honoring, the Muslim, the Jew, the infidel, the unbeliever, Neoplatonist, whatever they are, honoring their minds and allowing them to argue with him so we can try to discover the reason and the logic for the incarnation, which gave us the freedom to have this conversation to begin with. Kind of a circle. Wonderful. This is what we forget in modernity and postmodernity, right? The freedom we have to think and to argue, right? To debate. It's a wonderful thing. It comes out of Christianity. I mean, it's a Christian redemption of Socrates and Plato, but it's wonderful because it's allowing the possibility for a spiritual journey. I'm not going to kill you because you're of a certain race, ethnicity, culture, etc. No. I honor you because you're a human being. I honor you and I have to honor you because you're a human being, because you're made in the image and likeness of God, and you're always and everywhere a potential convert. I remember saying once to a Jew that I was praying, that he might find Jesus one day, and he was so offended. He said, that's very insulting. I said, no, it's not. I love you. I actually love you, and I want you to love the source of all love, which is Jesus Christ. Because he's the love of God made flesh. Died for the sins of the whole world. Yours too, buddy. But see, he was insulted, which is sad. But that's a sort of primitive barbarian posture, which doesn't really welcome dialectic. But dialectic is important, and this is what we really need to be thinking about here. So we haven't gone into any of the text today, but we're just getting ready now for Anselm to respond to Bosso's initial critique of the God-man, why God became man. And just saying, God just could have saved himself so much trouble, if he didn't redeem us in this way. He didn't repair human nature in this way. And you see, Anselm's going to come back at that and say, well, but that he did it in this way, as we believe, that he did it in this way is rational. That he did it in this way was for a reason, because God always does things for reason. And so while he wills something, it may take us some time to discover the reason and logic for his will, but that's no excuse not to find the reason and logic for his will, because God is all wise. So you see, Anselm's going to be standing against Bosso here and saying, okay, you're focusing on his omnipotence, but are you really honoring God? Are you really allowing God to honor himself in his creation? Are you really allowing God to honor his word, honor his law? We're going to get to the point in this dialogue. It's really wonderful. Is there a sense where God submits himself to his own law? The only religion in the world where God submits himself to his own law, sin and death for fallen creation, Christianity, Jesus Christ. He submits himself to his own law of sin and death in order to transform it, redeem it, repair it, remold it, remake it, reconcile it to himself, because even sin and death aren't too hard for God, because guess what God's going to do with sin and death? Make them into righteousness and new life, because that's what our God does. Nothing stands against our God. So you see, Bosso's almost limiting God. He's not really appreciating the omnipotence, because he's forgetting that the omnipotence, that God is all-powerful, should have to be reconciled with the fact that God is all-wise, omniscient. He knows all things. He does everything for a reason. There's a logic to everything that God the Father does. His logic is the Son by the Spirit. Spirit's like the energy, right? Very interesting. So look at where we are here. So we're going to be looking at this, and we're going to be looking at how, there's a real sense in which there's a logical consistency to God as we understand him in Jesus Christ. It's just fascinating, and it's beautiful and amazing, and I'm smiling because I love it, because I love God, and this is an amazing thing. And I hope you can, join me in this too. By the way, I'm trying to figure out how to do this so we can have a live interaction where you can actually type in your questions or your comments, because that would actually help me, because we need to be in dialogue too. So anyway, if any of you are nerdly gurus, nerdly experts who know all about how to do podcasts and live things, please tell me how to do it, and I'll start doing it that way, and then we can have questions and comments, and it helps me to grow in my understanding of what I'm trying to share with you. So you'll help me to grow. And also, I think you can have other questions that can challenge Anselm's logic and Anselm's response to the infidel, Bazo, the infidel that he's pretending to be, but taking on the position to be devil's advocate, which is great. So anyway, there we are today. We've gone on very long, but anyway, again, word to all nerds out there: if you know how to do the live thing and the question and answer business, let me know, because I really want to do this. It's a wonderful, wonderful exercise, and we should be doing it together so I can sort of see what you're thinking and be challenged by you, because that's Christian, Thank God for Jesus, because let me tell you something: freedom is a beautiful thing. Arguing, and that's a sad thing about the world we're living in now. These people in positions of power, mostly the left. It's leftism. Leftism is, it's brain dead, but it's also will to power. And if you challenge the positions of the sacred left, they are their own religion. They're just morons. But if you challenge them, they have to use violence and force to bring you down. I'm going to key your Tesla because I don't like what Elon's doing. Or I'm going to, light your Tesla on fire, or I'm going to blow up the Tesla plant, or, I'm going to maim you or harm you or hurt you, or I'm going to turn, use the judges to go against you, because, it's all about the will to power. And if we can do it, we're going to do it. Well, that's the modern left, and it has nothing to do with Christianity. It's sad. They lack real integrity, and they're really quite insecure. They're very insecure mobsters and thugs. That's all they are. They don't have any reason. They don't have much intelligence. They can't argue. They just can't do it. And if they do argue, they're reduced to sort of infantile jibes and name calling and all this silly other stuff. So what we got to really do is get back to the world of logic and dialectic, and think about the possibility of arguing things out and being wrong. I can be wrong. You can be wrong. We're broken toys. We're in the midst of being repaired by Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. And, it's okay. We're human. We're not God. And we're on our way to understanding. So I know that I know nothing. Okay, there we are. That's it for tonight. So we'll see you soon. We'll get back into the text soon. But any of you nerds out there, please, calling all nerds, please help me to do the podcasty live thing so that we can have little comments and challenges and we can fight. It's Christian. God bless. Good night.